Sarah Davey.
And I'm James Routledge.
And this is Books Unpacked.
Join us as we chat to people from across the publishing industry to unpack the life cycle of a book.
Pop the kettle on, get comfy, and we'll get started.
Welcome, Kathryn. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's lovely to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too.
I mean, I say us, actually, but today I am taking the reins solo. Sarah is kind of stepping away to focus on some other projects and all the festival work that she's got. But she is here with us in spirit today, at least. As I say, it's lovely to see you. And I think we've been talking about having this conversation for a few months now. So I'm really excited to kind of have you here. Sort of during the very first podcast sort of New Writing North workshop that we did, you were actually there on the day. So we've kind of come full circle now. You've kind of seen us with the kind of the spark of an idea, and then now we are like 16 episodes in.
Yeah, it's so great. I was looking through all the episodes earlier, and it's just great that you're here, that you've done, that it's going.
It's happening, yeah, in kind of one way or another. We're getting by, and I think so. We've done the whole first series, which was very much sort of broad strokes. We wanted to talk about getting published, maybe looking out for an editor or a agent, kind of working on a piece with an editor. And then kind of right through the process, through sort of sales and marketing, publicity. We talk to festival organizers, we've spoken to booksellers, we've spoken to various stages of the publishing world. And what I thought was really quite unique, especially from your perspective, is how many hats that you have worn over the years. Mm-hmm. I mean, as a writer yourself, also an editor and a producer. Can we start maybe with your writing? I mean, how did that all begin with you? Where did the interest in writing start?
Yeah, good question. It's nice to start with the writing, actually. Lately, it's been starting with everything else, and the writing comes after that. So, it did all start with the writing. I knew I wanted to be a writer before I knew I wanted to go into publishing. So, I used to write when I was quite little. I grew up in Wales, and we have a thing every year called the Eisteddfod, and all the schools will do their own little Eisteddfods as well. Mm-hmm. And so like writing competitions were like part and parcel of school every year. It's like more exciting than the nativity. It was just this big thing. And in year 6, in my final year of primary school, I won the writing competition, which meant I was the bard, and I was chaired the bard with this like daffodil ceremony, and there were druids, which were just like my classmates in sheets. But it was this moment in my life that I just thought, oh my God, it doesn't get better than this. And honestly, I still maintain that as the peak of my writing career. But I think I just got the bug. I thought, I love doing this, and maybe I'm good at it. And that was, in the meandering pathway into university, I think I sort of forgot that ambition that I had. I'd said, as an 11-year-old, this is it. I'm going to be a writer. Yeah. I'm going to publish books. And then you sort of understand that or get told that it's not a real job, that it's it's fanciful to think that, oh, that's my career path, and I was quite a high achiever, and I had lots of teachers telling me, don't do creative writing, do English literature, and I think that in a way that was good advice. I went to Durham University, and I had an absolutely brilliant experience. It's such a brilliant English department there, but I think it wasn't until sort of during my time there that I really remembered that writing was what I wanted to do, that's what this was all about. That's why I was studying these sort of greats of literature, was because I wanted to write. And so I started writing again in my 3rd year and just loved it. And since then I did an MA in creative writing, which I hadn't anticipated doing, but I thought as I was getting into publishing, why not also like it seemed to just come in tandem with my interest in being um, on that side of the industry as well. And so I thought, if I want to be a better editor, I can also be a better writer, vice versa. And yeah, so I've been sort of pursuing writing and a career in that world at the same simultaneously. I guess partly because of that thing again of like writing, it's not easy for that to be your career. Not your only one anyway.
Yeah, and I guess that's a lot of people's misconceptions, right? Like, oh, once you've written something, that can be like a full-time job. And like actually getting it out into the world can feel like a full-time job anyway. But
Yeah.
then once it is out in the world, I guess you're then suddenly on the other side and you're thinking, right, well, what now? Like, what next? And I guess you've very recently done that. I mean, your essay collection Seaglass came out last May, so you've had a full year of it being out into the world. I mean, can you maybe tell us a little bit maybe about the collection itself, and then I guess maybe what it's been like being quote unquote like a published writer? Like how that feels.
Yeah, I mean, so Seaglass, yeah, it's an essay collection that came about a little bit unexpectedly. I discovered writing creative nonfiction, having battled my way through uh my first novel over my MA. I then very much put down fiction and discovered a love for nonfiction, and um ended up with this essay collection that sprang from a personal essay that I really never anticipated I would write, but it was shortlisted in a competition in Wales, and a new imprint picked it up and sort of asked me if it was part of something longer, and I panicked. I thought, "Oh, what do I say?" And my friend, who's just such a great cheerleader, who's also a writer, she was like, "Obviously, you tell them it is." And as soon as I said, "Yes, it's part of an essay collection," I knew I had an essay collection. Like, it was all there. Like, and I spent the next year writing. I was in such a lucky position to have that for that to have happened, and sooner than I thought it would. So I didn't feel ready, but actually, I spent the next year working really hard on that essay collection, and I loved it, and I did it alongside working full time at New Writing North. And I look back now, and I don't really know how I managed to do it, but I think I was writing essays that I really loved writing, and just kind of having fun with it and exploring. What I love about essays is that each one can be totally different,
Yeah.
and I think it makes it hard to explain the essay collection to people because they say, "Oh, what's it about?" And I say, well, it's 10 essays about 10 different things, more than 10 different things, really, because not only each essay is about something else, but I approach it in a different way as well. And so, yeah, I really had fun with it. And there's a lot of nature in there. There's a lot of water. There's a
Yeah.
lot of sea and memory and nostalgia. And I really sort of, it is my first essay collection, and I very much mine my own experience in order to talk about things that I feel are important and relatable to other people. That's I guess the essence of what I was trying to do with it, and it's all about this idea of collecting, like in the way that you collect sea glass, that you collect thoughts and memories and ideas and experiences, and then looking at them and holding them up to the light and saying and looking at what they say and what we share as well. So yeah, that's Seaglass, and yeah, it coming out was quite a surreal experience because, as you know, I've worked with lots of authors. I've worked with lots of debut authors, and I've facilitated their book launches.
Yeah.
I sort of showed up at my own book launch, and I felt like I should be on the door taking names. Like it was brilliant. It was such a luxurious experience of not being responsible for the ticket sales and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
and I mean, obviously I was still concerned about ticket sales because it was my book, and that was terrifying in its own way, but like it felt so nice to just show up, and I wasn't stressed, I think, because I was just going to be asked about my work, and I know the answers in theory because I wrote it. So it yeah, I've chaired other authors as well, and it just felt really nice to finally be having imagined it a lot,
Yeah.
to finally be the other person on the stage, to be the author and to be asked about my own work. And so it was great, but also on the other side of that. I'm well aware of all of the, being a published author is lovely, but there's lots of things that are hard and lots of things that don't go how you want them to go.
Sure.
And I think, again, having experience, knowing lots of people who've done it, and also having experience in publishing is, I also know about all of that. So I'm quite a pessimistic author probably as well.
Well, I was gonna ask. I mean, a lot of people kind of not necessarily dive into writing or trying to get published, but certainly a lot of people go in a bit naive, and I think that's very natural. I think a lot of people sort of put writing first and industry second. Let's write something and then maybe further down the line think about how that reaches a bookshelf and how that actually reaches my readers. Whereas you've had a little bit, quite a lot more knowledge than the normal writer, I'd say. I mean, your time at New Writing North, I mean, it meant you were supporting such a wide range of writers. I mean, what do you think were maybe the key things that you picked up behind the scenes that maybe helped in that process, or do you think actually, no matter how much you know, it's still a struggle, and maybe it doesn't necessarily give you a leg up in any way?
I think knowledge is really useful in that it prepares you. It
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily give you much more control. I mean, it does in some ways. The thing I learned the most, and not just New Writing North, but before that, because obviously New Writing North, I was working with a lot of, I was helping run Durham Book Festival. I was programming events in Newcastle, and also working with developing writers. So, like you said, a whole range, but often also with dealing with writers published by Big Five
Mhm.
publishers. But before that, I was working with very small independent publishers, and that's how I started. And I think what I realized was across the whole spectrum, you, as an author, you will almost always be let down in some way. And that's not anyone's fault necessarily. Sometimes it is, but generally it's just because the vast majority of publishing teams are time poor and budget poor.
Yeah.
And so and there are so many books out there fighting for attention. If you think of how many books come out every Thursday, as a bookseller,
Yeah.
it's just like mind-boggling. And your book is is in competition, not just with everyone else's book, but also other books that publisher is publishing that year,
Yeah.
that week. And their attention is being divided between them all. So I think the thing that I learned from that was to know that I to not expect too much
Mhm.
from whoever would end up publishing my book, which was to sort of be prepared to put some of the work in myself, but also to pester and to not. And I think it's frustrating that authors often have to do so much of this like marketing work themselves, but you complaining about that isn't going to make it happen. Like if the team, if your publishing team just does not have the time and resources to do that stuff, then unfortunately, if you want something done, you've got to do it yourself. And so, I mean, that's the extreme version of it. Some publishing teams, do a great job and do loads of marketing work and put together a whole launch tour, and that's really brilliant. But I think I was able to know that to keep an eye on things and to check in with my like publicist and basically just sort of arm myself in case nothing happened, and be willing to step in. And I think using some of my own contacts and like nudging my publisher and that kind of thing really helped. And if I hadn't known to expect that, then it might, and I know other authors where this has happened and they realize too late that
Mhm.
actually maybe not that much has been done to promote their book. And yeah, and so, and they wish they'd known, and then for the next time they know that. But yeah, it's I think it's a perennial thing, and it's not often it's attributed to small independent publishers, but I think it happens across the board.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess that, I mean, that mindset, will absolutely help you in your publishing as well, and your editing. I mean, going forwards, then, I guess there's probably a little bit of a gap in my memory because the, I was seeing you quite relatively often with New Writing North, and then I knew you'd left, seemingly out of nowhere, although I know that these things don't happen overnight and a lot of planning has to go into these. But your Dwell Substack series sort of really picked up, and I was seeing that a lot. And then also This Place podcast was out in the world, and I was seeing you working on that too. And so this was like a nice sort of regular thing in my inbox, which I would enjoy. And then I see an announcement for Folding Rock. So obviously these things take a long time to plan. I mean, what were the starting the sort of seeds of Folding Rock? What were the kind of ideas that went into that project? And how long does it take from, oh, I want to start a writing journal, I want to put a magazine out there, to, first issue came out in March, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's amazing. Firstly, I mean, congratulations, because it's
yeah, thanks.
incredible. But it's a long process, right? Can you kind of walk us through a little bit of that?
Yeah, so I mean, Folding Rock is a bit of an exception to the usual rule, which is that, these lit mags start at kitchen tables
Mhm.
with a bunch of passionate people who really want to platform their often, their friends who are writing brilliant stuff, and it grows from there. Um, Folding Rock, so when I left New Writing North, when probably around the last time I saw you, Folding Rock didn't exist. It hadn't even been a conversation. I had no idea that in a year's time, I would be getting ready to launch a sort a proper literary journal publishing really exciting authors. I was going freelance, and so those sort of various projects that popped up and the book coming out was sort of keeping me busy as a
Mhm.
freelancer. But then this opportunity popped up not long after that, really quite soon after, um, where the Welsh Books Council, which is the funding body for publishing in Wales, they they're a bit like Arts Council, but specifically for books and book selling and book publishing.
Sure.
Um, they they announced a tender after a couple of years of tricky times in the literary journal scene in Wales. Lots of funding was cut. A few long-running important magazines lost their funding. And then basically a tender was opened for a new magazine to be established, and it was all very controversial, and it the whole process was quite bittersweet. But it was this opportunity to start something from scratch with funding, and I had conversations over the years with colleagues in because I'd started in Welsh publishing. That's where I'm
Mhm.
from. That's where what I'm really passionate about as well, because it's a really underserved part of the UK publishing scene. And I sort of thought, well, and initially saw the call out and thought, what idiots are going to go for that, because it's going to be such an enormous task, and it's like trying to turn a tide. Like, it's yeah, it's a lot, and with all the controversy around it, and the funding cuts, it was just a quite a daunting prospect. And then I thought, well, how often does this kind of opportunity come around to
Yeah.
actually make a difference? And actually, I'd talked for years about, coming back to Wales at some point and setting something new up, which is what I felt was really needed, was something new and fresh and energetic and ambitious for writers in Wales and readers as well. And I thought, well, maybe I should just. I was prompted by someone I used to work with actually, who said, why don't you go for that? And I thought, well, I'll do it if I can do it with someone else. I got in touch with another sort of freelancer that I used to work with in Welsh publishing, who very much understood the scene in the way that I did, and we'd ranted about what we wanted to see in Wales before. And
Sure.
so I got back in touch with him and said, maybe we should put in a bid. And immediately we both had a really clear vision of what this magazine would be and what it needed to be. And we said, we're only going to do this if we do it really well. If we go for really high quality design, the best writers we can find, if we think big, otherwise there's no point doing it.
Yeah.
And so we very quickly sort of put together this imaginary magazine at the time. Spent a couple of months really planning it all, hypothetically putting together budgets and a sample issue and getting in touch with all sorts of people for advice. I learned very quickly about the sort of business side of publishing that I was sort of loosely aware of, but hadn't been part of the nuts and bolts of before. And then, we got the funding. So we've got, for the next 3.5 years, which I think in total will be 11 issues of the magazine.
Wow.
We've got core funding from the Welsh government to do it, to make it happen. And that's a big responsibility. But really, that's how this magazine came about, which is not your average origin story,
Yeah.
because we've been trusted with this funding, but from scratch. So we've, they were looking for something new. So we had to then really prove ourselves and enact everything we said we were going to do with it. And we're just about to publish issue 2, which comes out early July. And so far it's been a whirlwind, and it's been exhausting, but also it's just been brilliant. And the writers we've worked with and the readers we've spoken to are so excited about it all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it looks amazing. I mean, like aesthetically, like so pleasing. And you should be so proud with the art object that it has become. But also, I mean, like the contents and like the author list is just, I mean, so impressive. Like issue 1, straight out the gate, like such an amazing list of writers. What was the submission process like? I mean, can you kind of talk us through that? Because, I mean, how much was it a case of you approaching authors that you know? How much was it like an open submission? Because I know you've obviously just done volume 2, which might have been slightly different to volume 1. Because you've submitted over the years, you've been on both sides of that submission process, how daunting it can be. I mean, what's that like now?
Yeah, so I think my experience as a writer has really strongly influenced what our process is when it comes to particularly our submissions process, because I feel strongly, as any writer does who's, submitted their work to all sorts of places, you'd feel really strongly about how that's done, because we've all had shitty experiences as well of that. And so, from the get-go, we had very clear principles that we said to the funders, like, if we can't make this work structurally from the start, then we don't want to do it, which was paying our writers a good amount, and not just the sort of big named commissioned authors, but people who submit their work and have never been published before.
Yeah.
That we pay them all the same amount, and that it's a respectable amount. It's
Yeah.
still not as much as I'd like it to be, and it will hopefully go up as time goes on. But it's far more than any other magazine, particularly based in Wales, is paying. And to be clear and to be transparent about that as well, so that everyone knows sort of how we roll. But then, when it comes to submissions, I felt quite strongly about making the process as clear as possible, making it very easy to submit work, making sure it was free to submit work, and also making sure we got back to everyone that submitted to us. And I know that that's a real challenge for some magazines who are inundated with work, but also it is really important, because we want this magazine to support and encourage writers, not to put them off. And even if we can't, we can only publish such a small fraction of the writers that share their work with us. But at least for the writers that we can't publish, we can encourage them to keep going.
Yeah.
So hopefully one day that it is them. So yeah, and there's more to be done on that front. Like, we want to do events to give people the chance to ask us about that process, so that especially those who haven't got as much experience, like we were saying earlier. Knowledge goes such a long way when you're coming to the industry for the first time. And so yeah, trying to make that as clear as possible. But yeah, so issue 1 was quite heavily commissioned work, because we had to, we didn't know, we didn't exist yet, so we didn't know who was going to submit, if anyone was going to submit, and what the quality of the work was going to be like. And we talked the talk about how brilliant Wales is, and rich in literary talent it is. We then couldn't publish after we had a date when that first issue was going to come out. We couldn't risk then not having any good work to put in it. And actually, so we approached writers that we really, really wanted to work with, and they all said yes, for starters, which was amazing. And we thought we'd have a harder time with that, but actually, they all were keen to be involved, which was brilliant. And then we opened submissions, and we had so much great work. We had an abundance of great work, and it was such a good problem to have, because I hate rejecting writers. It's my least favorite thing, I think, partly again because I am a writer myself, but also it's that you're on to a good thing when you have to turn away work that is more than good enough to be published. So yeah, hopefully that we keep getting more of that, and we tend to go for 50-50 commissioned and then sort of cold submissions. But that gradually will shift as we establish the magazine. We're sort of, the commissioned writers is us, in a way, working with established names in order to help us establish the name of the magazine, as well as being an important statement to publish debut short story authors alongside Joe Dunthorne's latest short story. That's a really important statement to make. It's all about quality, and if they match up in quality, which often they do, if you search and you look for the new talent, then yeah, that's a brilliant sort of showcase of the breadth of what's going on. But then also, yeah, I think gradually we will slightly tilt more towards the open submissions. And often we get actually quite writers that we know of in our submissions. So another thing that we do is that we read all of our submissions anonymously. Sure. Which I don't know how common a practice that is, but we found it really important, because what we found in these first 2 issues is that when it comes to the end of when we sort of shortlisted work and we've decided who we're going to go with, we then look at these pieces and who they're by, and it's really often quite surprising. And often as well, it's meant that we've rejected some actually really well-known writers which I think is really good, because if we'd known who they were, we might have been swayed. We might have been like, oh, but we really should have that name in our magazine. But ultimately, it's about the quality of the work. And if they've submitted something that's just not quite there, or just isn't right for that issue, then we can't prioritize it over a piece of work by an unknown author that is exceptional. So has actually been in the same, and I think that was probably partly influenced by working with like New Writing North on competitions and things like that. But I think that blind reading has been a really important part of our process, and we don't have full control then over what the sort of names of the final issue will look like together. For example, both issues, interestingly, have been quite heavily female authors. And I'm fine with that. That's just what's floated to the surface. So
yeah. And it's it's amazing, especially considering that these are each issue is themed as well, right? So you're looking for something quite specific, and I guess you're looking for something that's going to fit the overall tone and not just the theme, but they need to be a cohesive collection as well. So you're not just picking the best names that come your way. So
No,
it's
exactly.
really amazing that you've done it that way. And I mean, so issue 1 was roots, right? I mean, a really interesting place to start. I mean, did that come kind of naturally further down the line that you sort of saw this connection between work, or was that very much before the commission stage?
That was when we were really first imagining the magazine and sort of what would an issue look like and what would our first issue look like, and we very sort of naturally fell upon it. Was sort of the first idea that came to mind was roots, and it just our themes, we want them to be very much springboards, not like limiters on what
Sure.
could be in that issue. And so roots is the kind of, it just felt right as we sort of laid our own roots as a magazine, but also the idea that we weren't trying to replace or wash over what had gone before in, like, Wales's really like rich literary scene, that there are already so many roots and layers there, and that's partly also what inspired the, even like the name Folding Rock, and the it's a nod to the amazing geology of Wales, but also like when you look at the layers of, I mean, I guess we're talking about like deep time, far long before the publishing industry was a thing. But it was a nice loose metaphor for everything that had gone before, and that we were very much building on it, as well as being a slightly tongue in cheek. The impossible task of folding rock. It does
Mhm.
happen with time and determination. So,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
yeah.
No, I love it. And I mean, I definitely want to continue talking about issue 2, because I'm really excited to kind of see some of the news about that. So we'll maybe look ahead in a moment. But just in your recent event program, I've just been kind of blown away by how busy you guys have all been. Can you tell me how the Hay Festival event sort of went and how that all came about? I mean, you've had an incredibly busy few months. Um,
Yeah,
can you?
it's been slightly mad. No, so Hay Festival was a partnership that I really wanted to happen. It seemed really obvious to me, and it was easier than I thought it would be, because they reached out to us not long after we announced the magazine with basically the same thought, which was that we would work with the Writers at Work program,
Mhm.
which is a really fantastic development program that's been running with Hay Festival for a while now. It's actually a program I, for many years, was desperate to be on, and each year something a friend or a sibling would be getting married that week, or like not that I
Sure.
necessarily would have gotten on, but I couldn't even apply, unless you're available for the whole week. It's just this amazing opportunity for writers, not who are sort of already on their way to establishing a creative career, so
Yeah.
maybe have a few things published, or even a book, or have some experience, but they're at that crucial stage where it could really turn into something major and exciting. And so it's giving them the chance to be at Hay Festival all week for the full 10 days, to be in the green room of Hay Festival, which is this magical place where wonderful things happen, because
Mhm.
you're sat there. For anyone not familiar, a green room, like a book festival, is basically where all the authors hang out in between having to go and do their talks. Um, and it's just a space where they can go and relax and dump their stuff and have a coffee, sort of before they have to be on stage and talk about their books. Obviously Hay Festival has some really exciting people, so you go
Yeah.
to the green room at Hay Festival, and it's the best people watching in the world, because, at least for a book lover, because you've got Stephen Fry next to you, or Michael Morpurgo opposite you at lunch, or like
Just
it's
casual, just
yeah,
gossiping away as they do.
yeah. Honestly, it's so anyway. As an emerging writer, being in that space, seeing your like literary heroes just queuing up for coffee next to you is like a really cool thing. So that's
Yeah.
just the tip of the iceberg, but also they have a whole program of talks, because you've got these brilliant people coming to Hay Festival. Anyway, a lot of them are coming with their agents, their publicists. You've got writers themselves doing amazing things, and so a lot of them come and talk to the writers at work, and run workshops, and so we did some of that. as editors of Folding Rock. And actually, selfishly, we used the session partly to like hear from them as well, because we were like, you know, we're in this amazing position where we get to build a magazine, hopefully the right way. I think there's many ways of doing it, and there's not necessarily a right way, but we have an opportunity to start as we mean to go on. And so, you know, as writers, what do you want from a magazine? What do you want to see in Wales? Like what and what can we do better? And so that was a really, really cool discussion. And it gave us a chance as well to like hear about their work and what they were doing, and just be really excited. You know, hopefully that's a room full of future contributors to the magazine. That's what I hope. That's partly why I wanted to be involved in the Writers at Work, because it's these kinds of programs that really do launch careers. And literary magazines are few and far between now, unless you're lucky enough to live in Ireland. and and they're so important, because if you stop funding a magazine or even a development program like Writers at Work, right? If you stop funding it and it ceases to exist, nothing happens. It's easy to do because nothing happens, but that's exactly the problem. Is that nothing happens, and the amount of amazing things that can come out of these programs or journals, and careers that can be launched, and really important voices that can be discovered, that none of that happens. You don't know what writers might have come through them, because they don't because the platform isn't there anymore. And so it's this sort of quiet but essential part of the publishing ecosystem, that, you know, when you look back at so many enormous successful authors, their bios, their first publications were in, you know, Sally Rooney started at Stinging Fly. You know, we want to be the stinging fly for the next Welsh Sally Rooney.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I mean, ecosystem is exactly the right term, right? I mean, what we're looking at is part of the podcast is all about this life cycle of a book. And I guess magazines are just one direction you can go down, but I think it's quite an important one, and often the first steps that writers have as an opportunity to send out work. I mean, how do you feel like Folding Rock might become part of a developmental program in its own right? I mean, would you be looking at supporting authors maybe along that journey of getting published, you know, trying something out, getting it published once, maybe helping them to submit to larger publishing houses or agents? I mean, is it a device that can be used in that way, do you think?
I mean, I think so, because really, like, the genesis of the magazine was more an idea of basically feeling adamant that more needed to be done for Welsh writing.
Yeah.
And, you know, the magazine is a way of doing that. But so in terms of like development work, I absolutely, and I learned so much from New Writing North and everything that they've done for writing in the north of England and writers there. And I really want to see more of that. There's already a few things happening in Wales, but, you know, I'd love for us, I've got ideas already of what we can do to help with that. But ultimately it all comes down to funding and resources,
Yeah.
and as everything does, as the magazine itself did. And so it's, you know, I'm working sort of in the background alongside, you know, making sure that we have a magazine we're really proud of that is coming out 3 times a year, as it should.
Yeah.
But also thinking about, how we can use that as a tool to develop careers. And obviously the obvious way of doing that is by publishing writers and getting their work noticed, which has already happened, by the way. One of the authors in our first issue, who had never been published before, has already, like, an agent got in touch with us and was like, can you put me in touch with this author, because I'm really interested in speaking to them about their work, because I read their piece of Folding Rock. And we were like, yes, we've already done it. I mean, I don't know what's happened since then, but even just that conversation is great, because that wouldn't have happened otherwise. But anyway, the so the development side of things, and in terms of working with writers, like, again, I feel strongly about it because I know how much of an impact that kind of work has on the
Mhm.
individual writer. Um, my my own I owe my sort of first publishing deal to the New Welsh Review, which was one of the magazines that lost its funding.
Mhm.
Because it's them that picked up that shortlisted my essay, and in that sort of quite simple way just made it available to find, made me findable. So we've
Yeah.
got that in that we can hopefully help like platform the writers that work. We made sure we spotlighted them all on our website just to help make them findable. But I think in terms of working with writers directly and helping them develop their skills, that's really hard because of how little time we have.
Mhm.
And I reading through submissions often is really hard because often I'll read a piece and I know why it's not working. But there's no way when I've got however many other pieces that have been
Sure.
submitted, I can then, as much as I'd like to, get in work with that author to take it to where it needs to go. And
Mhm.
so in that respect, I think realistically we need to think about how we can support writers to support themselves and also
Mhm.
to support each other, because I think any editor in the industry or agent as well is so time poor, and most people's hearts in the right place, but it's not where you should be seeking sort of your help in terms of your work, I think, because it's just not realistic.
Sure.
But you can find it with peers, like, and sharing your work with each other. And so I think trying to create more spaces where writers are learning, developing their skills maybe more independently, but also um sharing that work with each other and being their own critics and their own editors, which is really
Mhm.
important, I think, um, probably is the more realistic way to hopefully try and help more writers rather than the few that we're able to.
Yeah. I mean, it's still so early days and you're such a small team.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see maybe, 11 issues down the line or something.
Mhm.
But that does take us to issue 2. I'd love to talk about Speak to Me as a theme, and how that maybe is slightly different to Roots in terms of content, in terms of the authors you've already got lined up. Um, I've just seen the cover looks beautiful. How's issue 2 gone compared to issue 1, and what have we got to look forward to?
It's so it went to print yesterday,
Mhm.
which is always a big relief, because that's kind of that's the most important deadline, really, because if it doesn't
Yeah.
go to print in time, then it's not nothing else is going to happen in time. But we also maybe slightly unhelpfully, and we're still working out our timeline. This is the first time we've sort of gone full. When issue 2 comes out, will be the first full cycle of an issue,
Yeah.
because that issue 1 then becomes the last issue. Um, it's so we're still very much working out our timeline. So I think issue 2 did feel a little bit rushed in terms of commissioning. That was mainly my fault because I got married and went on my honeymoon. But
I mean, that's slightly forgivable, I think.
yeah, that was planned before we knew that we were gonna have a funded magazine. But it was, yeah, my poor co-editor Rob was left solo a week after issue 1 came out. But it was fine. We already had a really clear idea of what issue 2 was going to be. We'd already spoken to writers. We'd already opened submissions.
Yeah.
So it's luckily we've gotten another abundance of great work, and again we had to reject some brilliant writers. But I think
Mhm.
the issue is exciting because there's some really technically creative and challenging stuff in there. Like, I, as a
Interesting.
writer, feel really inspired by this issue. I mean, I was by issue 1 as well, but like there are some writers doing just some really cool things
Mhm.
in issue 2 and like pushing themselves creatively. And I think for any writers out there, like, it's going to be really good food for your own creativity, because it's, when you read something, especially something new, especially by maybe a writer that's also new to you or is also emerging, that like just gets your brain fizzing with what it's doing and what you could do then. And you know,
Yeah.
it's the kind of stuff that working on these pieces with the writers this time round, like, and maybe it's partly because I'm in that exciting point in like my own writing projects where like everything's giving me ideas, but
Mhm.
like it's it was just really energizing. And I hope that in a way, and I say this a little bit in my editorial for this one, but it feels like I hope it sparks a bit of like healthy competition.
Mm.
I think it's so important to writers, is to read stuff and be like, I want to be able to do that, or I want to be able to do something better, or oh, if they can be daring in this way, then maybe I could do it in this. And it's just to not rest on your laurels. And so there's a few uh I think like surprising pieces in there that I'm excited about, and also just some very capable hands as well. I mean, you'll
Mhm.
have seen the list, but we've got Horatio Clare in this one, and we've got Anya Card, and we've got um I've gone blank already on who.
It's gone to print. It's done now.
Yeah.
I
um,
I think you're absolutely right, though. I mean, like short essays, short stories. I mean, for me, that's where I find it. That's where I find the most inspiration. You know, that's where the sparks are flying. Um, yeah, I love that. So I cannot wait to read it. It's going to be out in the world when, do we think?
10th of July.
10th of July.
Yeah.
Well, we
Yeah.
can put that in our diaries, and we can
Yes.
we can already we get our orders in now, can we?
Yeah, absolutely. And the great thing about it, and this is what I hope over time will become clear, and the other piece of the puzzle in like what I imagined for Folding Rock from the beginning, which is this kind of demonstration that Welsh writing is not only relevant to people in Wales,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it just means that we're prioritizing a region that isn't prioritized by other publications, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't have anything to do with what people are writing about. Obviously, it's a theme around language, so there are going to be certain themes, certain elements that you expect that will come up in the issue,
Mhm.
uh, but also, you know, that should be interesting to an someone who lives in England and their neighbor is a country with a deep and complex and fascinating linguistic history, you know, that you should want to read about what that means now for the average Welsh speaker and how that feels. You should, you know, like, why not?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway, there's also, you know, there's pieces in there. We don't only publish Welsh authors, it's writing from Wales and beyond, but there's also, you know, they can write about whatever they like. So yeah, 10th of July, whether you're Welsh or not, keep an eye out.
So kind of the clock is ticking. So we're probably on our final question. And you know, we always like to end the podcasts going full circle, you know? I mean, going back to the life cycle of a book. Um, as we've only really just touched on, there's not many areas of the publishing world that you probably haven't had a little experience in. Obviously, as a writer, editor, producer, now publisher. But if you could step into another part of the book world for a day, I mean, which role or job would you most like to learn about? Is there a particular area that you maybe don't know as much about that you'd like to find out about? That's maybe our next step on the podcast.
Um, I mean, one I would say is bookselling, because I think it is any publisher will say that bookselling is the most important element of the life cycle of a book, because booksellers, if it weren't for booksellers, none of the rest of us would be here. And I think it's often this whimsical job that people think is a breeze, and actually, as you know, James, is not a breeze. It's a really hard job. And I was lucky enough to sort of get to spend a day as a bookseller at Bookish in Kirkcaldy
Oh,
last year.
amazing.
um and it was really fun, but also it's not easy. And I've worked with lots of booksellers, and I've often been the person banging on the door being like, why isn't this book in stock, and please do an event with this author, and it's, but then also I would say you've already looked at audiobooks, which I think is a fascinating part of the industry that isn't talked about enough.
Yeah.
And then I think sales.
Mhm.
Honestly, it's a dark art, and I want to know how it's done. I want to know how to make a bestseller.
So we've touched on sales a little bit. We talked to Alice from Harper North about sales and marketing. Now Harper North kind of operate as like an imprint, but also in their own little way, a kind of almost like an indie compared to the much larger kind of HarperCollins machine. But actually also in the last episode, we talked to Anna Murphy, who's a sales rep. So we've kind of seen it almost on both sides of that role, of that kind of really large job. So it's been interesting, but yeah, there's so much more to look into. But in terms of bookshops, we should probably end on that. What's your local bookshop now? Where do you go for books?
So York has a few. I'm in York at the moment. My local bookshop, which is Griffin Books in Penarth, which because Penarth is where I'm from, and I'm very proud to have Griffin Books as my local bookshop. My local bookshop that's not that local here, that's very close to my heart, is Collected in Durham. They did my first ever book event, and they're just wonderful, and I sometimes get to chair authors there, and they've expanded, and if you're ever near Durham, go to Collected. York is looking forward to Toppings opening up here soon, which I'm really excited about, and I think will be a nice addition to what's already quite a rich bookshop culture, but often is sort of secondhand bookshops or children's bookshops. So it'll be really nice to have a bigger sort of the kind of bookshop that can hold sort of meteor author events, which I think we need more of.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for listening. We hope you learned something new like we always do.
Follow us on Instagram and subscribe to our Substack to be the first to hear more.
And you can find us in all the places you usually find your podcasts.
Until next time, keep reading.